guys, in making this, I realized just how important plant life is. Without plants, we would truly not be here. So there's lots and lots of adaptations of plants that make the plant kingdom so diverse. But I hope that maybe through this PowerPoint you'll see that an adaptation is any kind of trait that helps that organism live and live long enough to breed and pass on its traits. Even in plants. Now, I know animals do that, but plants do too. Now, as far as biomes go, a biome is nothing more than a large area of land that shares the same climate and temperature and plants and animals. So today we're talking about the desert biome. You could drive 60 miles west and go to Monahans. Monahans, if you've never been there, is a wonderful place to go. It's full of sand, and you're going to look at the organisms that live there and be totally fascinated. In other words, now you won't find this over there, but in the desert biome, we kind of have holly leaves. Look at the presence of these leaves. If I were an animal, I would not want to bite down on these leaves. They have these little thorns. So, we know that some plants have spines to discourage animals from eating them to get water. Plants are full of water. Animals are smart. They know if they eat the plants, they get the water. So plants have to come up with an adaptation that keeps them from being eaten. Clever, clever. Number 2, flowers that open at night attract pollinators. I remember my mom and dad had a moon vine in their front yard. At night, they were beautiful. In fact, my sister's wedding, we didn't have to buy flowers. We used the moon vines as decoration. These bloom at night to attract the pollinators. Because, see, it's cooler at night and these pollinators generally get out in the desert because it's just too hot during the daytime. Now, I've seen many of those. I remember my cousin pushed me in a cactus. I deserved it because I had pinched her. But this cactus has an adaptation. If you look at it, you'll see that the spines are light-colored. We know that light-colored objects reflect the sun's energy, whereas dark-colored objects absorb it. So this plant has learned or evolved, adapted itself so that it can stay cool. So the cactus displays several desert adaptations. It has spines rather than broad leaves, and it stores water in its stem. So the water is stored in the darker green part down below. What you're seeing here are the spines, which are modified leaves. Modified leaves, got to remember that. All right. Another wonderful adaptation of plants in the desert biome are succulent plants. Succulents. Now that is a really weird word, but let me show you a succulent plant. I have some aloe vera right here. Can you see the thickness of the leaves? They're full of water, so if you were a smart animal, you would eat these. Succulent plants store water in their stems or leaves. This is common to a desert biome. Now, another adaptation that plants have are light-colored hair that helps protect the plant during the heat of the day. If you'll notice, all of this is light. Once again, light objects reflect the sun's energy. Dark objects absorb it. So through the years of evolution, this particular plant has learned that light hairs protect it from the heat's harsh energy. This plant has a waxy coating. That waxy coating on its leaves keeps it from getting waterlogged or protection against the sun's energy. I can show you another example that's found right here in our classroom. Can you see the waxy coatingness of this? Water would just be repelled right off of that. So that's the same plant that's on your screen right now. Once again, we're talking desert biome. Another biome that we need to be very familiar with, because this is where we live, is the grassland biome. Now please know that these biomes overlap. We don't have these lines drawn across our continent that says grassland here, desert there, deciduous forest there. They all tend to kind of merge together. We live in a grassland biome, but we do see some of the plants from a desert biome over here, such as cacti. But in the grassland biome, the trees have to have some kind of protection against fire, because in a grassland biome, when these plants die, they are often burned. Because in the grassland biome, you see the 4 seasons: spring, summer, winter, and fall. And in the spring, forest fires, grass fires are very common. So here we have a tree that has lots and lots of bark. You can see these big heavy bark right here. This protects this tree from forest fires or from fires of some kind. Now, as far as this dude right here, I don't know him. He's not my nephew. I don't know him. I just found a picture of him on the internet. I like the way the bark was formed. In addition to that bark, I also have this tree, this ring right here. This was cut down by my neighbor, and you can see the thick bark. Can you see the thick bark right here? Yes, the thick bark right here that protects this tree. However, I did kill some trees in my backyard because I did something really bad once. I burned my grass. Don't burn your grass, especially now since we're in a fire alert. All right, here, this is typical of West Texas, typical of a grassland biome. During a fire, while above ground portions of grasses may perish, the root portions live. So when that fire goes through that hillside, it's not killing the grass, it's just killing the top green leafy part. The root parts are all established. Oh, this is typical of Big Spring rather. Look at this. This is prairie shrubs. And you can see that this is a typical plant found in a grassland biome. So prairie shrubs readily resprout after a fire. So this is a healthy piece of land that's been burned and it's replacing, it's re-sprouting grasses that live there. Grassland biome, even though this is a desert plant, we do see it in the grassland biome. These are modified leaves, which are an adaptation that helps it to survive. It helps them to cut back on evaporation or transpiration. So you can see the stem of the plant right here. This is the stem with all these modified leaves coming out. So prairie grasses have narrow leaves which lose less water than broad leaves. You don't need this big broad leaf that's going to lose a lot of water when the sun shines on it. So we need these small adapted leaves. Typical scene in a grassland biome. All these wonderful species of grasses. There's 500 species of grasses, and of which I think I'm allergic to 499 of them. But the soft stems bend, which is really cool, because you wouldn't want all these grasses to break in the wind. So the narrow leaves, once again, minimize the water loss. So this is an adaptation. The stems bending, and they're narrow to avoid water loss. Many grasses are wind pollinated. Goodness knows we've seen lots of wind lately. In fact, you can look at my fence and see that we've seen lots of wind lately. So we've talked in the past about pollination, and pollination is the transfer of pollen from the male part of the plant to the female part of the plant, and wind is one of the ways in which pollen is transferred. Remember, we've got wind and water and animals and insects and gravity. And in West Texas, wind is primarily the key for moving pollen. So many grasses are wind pollinated and are well suited to the exposed windy conditions of the grassland. Now, looking at this picture before we even look, let's look at this picture. You see the grassy part on top, and it's a yucky picture, but that's all I can find. And the bottom part is the root. Look how well established those roots are. So over here, roots of the prairie grasses extend deep into the ground. That anchors them. And it also allows them to absorb as much moisture as they can. This extensive root system prevents grazing animals. Oh my goodness, what is a grazing animal? Well, it's like a deer, a cow, a horse, because when they eat and they pull the roots up, they don't want to pull the plant completely out. You've got to somehow keep the root there. Let the animal eat the top part. So it protects the plants from the grazing animals. Now, Tropical rainforest. I love tropical rainforests because it's moist. Look at the adaptations of these leaves. I can just see water dripping off of these. Drip tip leaves help shed excess water. That is a wonderful adaptation for those plants that are found in a tropical rainforest. In addition, look at these roots just hanging in the air. So we have some plants have what we call aerial. That means in the air, and I hope I haven't misspelled that. We can check it out later. But some plants have aerial roots that cling to the host plant. They absorb minerals and absorb water from the atmosphere. I would imagine that these would eventually starve the plant out itself. But you can see the extent of which these roots that grow in the air. You can see that right over there. Now, flowers blooming on the forest floor, that's weird. Flowers on the forest floor are designed for one purpose, and that is to attract animal pollinators. Since there's no wind in the tropical rainforest, you just get lots of rain. Because the wind is taken away, you've got to have kind of an insurance that pollination is going to take place. So these flowers attract pollinators, even at night. Oh, now this is a weird plant. I don't know that I had ever seen anything like this, but this would have a purpose. This would be a special adaptation. Sometimes the soil is really yucky. It doesn't allow the tree to be, well established. So prop roots help support plants in the shallow soil. This is cool. Who would have ever thought? Some plants collect rainwater. Where? If you'll look right through here, you may not can see it, but there's a puddle of water. Plants know they have to have water to photosynthesize because we know that water plus carbon dioxide makes the sugar and the oxygen. So it hangs on to whatever water it can. Now, temperate deciduous forest. I love this area. Once again, in grasslands, you can see winter, summer, spring, and fall. In a temperate forest, you can also see spring, summer, winter, and fall by the color of the leaves. I took some of these when I went to Boston. We have big, broad leaves. Look how broad they are. That way, lots of photosynthesis will take place when the temperature is right. So broad leaves can capture a lot of sunlight for the tree. Now, I don't know her. I wonder what her dog's name is. Probably Otis or something like that. But many trees have thick bark, not only to protect them against fires, but protect them against cold winters. In a deciduous forest, it gets really, really cold. So this thick bark will protect that tree during those cold winters. In autumn, once again, in a deciduous forest, the leaves fall off. This indicates, it says, in autumn, deciduous trees lose their leaves to minimize water loss. Most of the water comes in the form of snow. There's not a lot of water in snow. It takes time for it to melt. So they've got to kind of hold on to whatever water they can. So they just lose the leaves to minimize water loss. A taiga forest. A taiga forest. I'm not sure I'd want to live here. This is where it's extremely cold, but the trees are most unique. Look at the adaptations. It looks almost like a cactus with the skinny, narrow leaves. It says needle-like leaves help reduce water loss and aids in the shedding of snow. Once again, most of the water comes in the form of snow. There's not a lot of water in snow, just a lot of weight. So all that snow on those leaves would bear it down. So an adaptation is to have narrow leaves. Needles are dark in color. Once again, just like on the cactus with the light-colored hair. The darker colored leaves absorb more sunlight. The lighter colored leaves reflect the sunlight. In this case, okay, let's go right up. Waxy coating. This looks almost like a holly leaf. Once again, look at the pointedness. So if I was an animal, I probably wouldn't want to eat these leaves. It might hurt my mouth. But also, the waxy coating on the leaves prevents evaporation, or I think in plant life it's called transpiration. This is typical of a taiga forest. Look at the weight of the snow, how heavy it is. It's a good thing these leaves are very narrow. It would break the leaves. So the shape of many conifer trees helps shed heavy snow to save the leaves from breaking. So adaptation after adaptation. Let's go on. We know that in order for photosynthesis to occur, things have to be just right. The temperature has to be right, the availability of sunlight has to be just right, and the availability of water has to be just right. If not, the tree shuts down and will not photosynthesize. So many trees are what we call evergreen, so that plants can photosynthesize right away when the temperatures go up. Because when it's 20 degrees outside, there's not a whole lot of photosynthesis taking place. Water plants, most unique. Designed so that the stomata is on the top part of the leaf, because this is where the gases are exchanged. The chloroplasts are also at the top, so they float atop or on top of the water, exposing the chloroplast to the sunlight. Now, roots are important, but in a water plant, you don't need a lot of roots. All you need is a little bit of anchorage. So in water plants, roots and root hairs are reduced or absent. Roots only need, plant roots only are needed for anchorage, which means to hold them in place. And right here, you can see this is a water plant. This is the root. All it does is to anchor it in place. It doesn't need a lot of absorption because it lives in a water environment. Another cool adaptation. Water plants have to be flexible. The water has a lot of force, and if water is traveling rapid, then the leaf will bend, just like the wind will bend leaves as well. So you need them to be flexible. Lots of adaptations in the plant kingdom. Now, here's a crazy one right here. These are called carnivorous plants. I know you can't read it because it's too small, but I do want you to hear me and hear me well. Carnivorous plants really do not eat the prey. They do not eat the prey. What they do is there's little trigger hairs in here, and when an insect or an animal crawls in here, if it hits those 3 hairs all at the same time, then it will shut. Then the animal or the insect rots and decays, and the organism will, the plant will absorb the material that it was made of. These primarily live in really poor soil, so they need the nutrients from the decaying organism for their own benefit. I have an unsuspecting animal here. As he crawls into the Venus flytrap, he has no clue what's going to happen to him. He doesn't realize there's 3 or 4 little hairs that he's about to tread on. And when he does, it's too late. Oh no. Oh no. That's probably your last step right there. And he's gone. Now, it didn't kill him. He's not going to eat him. All he's going to do is let him die and decay and absorb the nutrients. Some plants are shaped like a funnel. If you look at these, you can see where that may be right there an insect. That's an insect. He's going to crawl down inside there, and then it's got little hairs that face downward. He can't crawl up. So once again, he dies, he decays, and the plant uses the nutrients that was in his decaying body as energy, and as, well, not as energy, but as nutrients. This is the pitcher plant. Look at that. You can see where insects could crawl down there. Now, some plants have an adaptation where they can trap prey like sticky fly paper. You can't see it very well, but this is real gooey and sticky. So you can imagine being an animal and you crawl in there and you're glued. Once again, you're going to die, you're going to decay, and that plant is going to use the material inside your decaying body as nutrients. So the leaves are covered with glandular hairs that secrete a sticky fluid. The word secrete means gives off. This is the kind of plant I need because I tend to overwater my plants or I don't water them enough. This plant, they say, rises from the dead. Not so, really. Basically what happens, the resurrection fern lives in a very dry climate. This is what it looks like. When there's not enough water, it dries up into a shriveled up ball. Once it's hydrated or watered, the plant turns green and leafy again. And as long as you keep it watered, it's going to grow into a nice plant. If you stop watering it, it's going to turn into a dry ball again. So this is kind of like a big overgrown seed. All you have to do is water it, it turns leafy. You let it dry out, it turns back to a ball. That is a really unique adaptation. Now, some plants can strangle. If you'll think of the movie Jumanji, when the plants came alive and they trapped people and pulled them down holes and everything else. There's something called a ficus seed. Now, I want you to think about what this would look like. I'll read it while you think about what it would look like. Ficus seeds germinate in the branches of a tree. It will then make roots that grow down the trunk. Once the roots reach the ground, they grow into the soil. The roots get larger in diameter each year and will eventually completely surround the tree. The ficus roots eventually strangle the tree. It could do the same thing to you, folks, if you stayed in one place and did not move for decades. This is what it looks like. You can see those roots are just strangling the life out of the tree. Okay? That is an adaptation that's just to ficus seeds. Now this is called the corpse's lily. All I can say to you is this has an adaptation that enables it to stink badly. I mean stink. You can see this dude has a gas mask on. The stink and the stench would attract some organisms, some animals. So the flowers stink like rotting meat or a rotting animal. Why? Once again, to attract the pollinators. Now, down in Houston last year, they had one of these corpses lilies in the Science Museum. And yeah, like an idiot, I had it on live feed, and I could watch all the people come through and smell the stinky, rotting animal. They even had a stinkometer, and it was bad. I saw one lady carrying her baby in there, and I thought, why would you do that? This flower stinks badly to attract the pollinators. There are some that look like rocks. Remember we used the word succulent a while ago? This looks like a rock, but it's not. It's full of water, which makes it succulent. But it's disguised as rock. That way other animals don't come up and eat it trying to get water. Over here, the Texas bluebonnet seeds look like rocks. And now this is clever. Birds eat the seeds. They think they're eating rocks. They don't know they're eating seeds because chickens and birds have a crop that require gravel and rocks to help grind the food. So what they're doing is they're eating the seed, and then they fly off somewhere and defecate, go to the bathroom, and they spread the seed from here to over there. Wonderful adaptation for spreading seeds. They look like rocks. These are just pictures that show flowers that live in and among other flowers, so it's kind of a mutualistic relationship. Can't tell much about those. This is a ball moss. It's a native Texas plant. They grow even in power lines. This flower is unique. You touch it, it shrivels up. Why? Because it thinks you're trying to eat it for the water that it contains. So it folds up its leaflets and droops its leaves when it's touched. Why? It may close them at night to conserve water, or it may close them when touched so that they're not as visible to be eaten by grazing animals. Clever, clever adaptations. Plants have found a way.
Well, you know you make me wanna kick my heels up and throw my hands up and...
Now, when you take the EOC test, you can take it to the bank. They're going to ask you about mutualistic relationships. One of those mutualistic relationships is a lichen. A lichen is a mutualistic relationship between an alga, which is one algae, and a fungus. Now, the odd thing here is the fungus is just like us. It can't make its own food, but the algae is really good at making food. So the fungus brings the water in, and the algae takes the water and makes food through photosynthesis. And you can see lichens come in all colors. Scientists can look at these and determine air pollution in a certain area. So this is a mutualistic relationship between an alga and a fungus. Another mutualistic relationship is a relationship between plant roots and fungal roots. There again, this is good. It increases the surface area of the root probably about 80 times. So these kinds of relationships are good. And you can see here, this would be the plant roots. The big clumpy things would be the fungus roots. And fungus is good at really bringing in water, so it makes more water for the plant itself. Last year on the ELC test, they asked this question. These are nurseries. On an oak leaf, an insect crawls up there and lays her eggs. She needs a protected nursery for her growing eggs. So they're enclosed in a little ball that sticks to the leaf itself. Now this is what we call commensalism. It's not parasitism, it's commensalism. The tree doesn't care. Now it worried me because my tree out front had these. But when it gets too heavy, the leaf falls off and the tree just makes another leaf. But these are baby spiders or insects. In fact, on my tree they're called spider mites. This one was laid by a wasp that stuck to the leaf. So when they ask you about the word galls, just know that these are nurseries for insects and spiders. Now, that concludes our study on the adaptations of plants, and I hope you have a little bit more appreciation for these plants that surround us on a daily basis. They're truly remarkable and have come up with fantastic ways of existing. Later.
What you